Welcome into the Paul Farrington Show. Paul joined by Robert Ziggy Ziegler at the University of Virginia with a little bit of a wild card reaction. We're just sort of talking football in this one here. I won't be diving too deep into the games from wild card weekend for various reasons. You know, we exhausted our takes. We actually did a lot of instant reactions to those games, so you could go and check out on the channel if you want to see some Vikings fans coping. We went for an hour and a half after the Vikings-Rams game yesterday. It's pretty long. One of the longest recordings we've ever had. And it was good therapy. It felt good to let loose some of the emotions that were festering within us as the Vikings just absolutely sucked. No other way to say it. Against the Rams. We're going to have a lot more content coming out throughout the remainder of the playoffs here. It's not over just because the Vikings and Packers are out. We have a Lions fan base, a Texans fan base. We're trying to build up as many as we can. So there will be more content coming out on the channel. It's not the off season yet. If you're enjoying these videos, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. You can listen on audio if you're not watching on YouTube, and Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. We have those accounts up as well with content coming out fairly often and quite frequently on those channels as well. So we appreciate everybody who's been listening. If you want to become a member, you want to step up your game and not just be a subscriber, go to our channel homepage to become a member. We're going to have some more off-season contests and prizes giving out. We have a few that we have to give to fans right now from the Pick'em League. Can't wait for the off season's fun. I have a great time during the off season. So Ziggy, before we dive into the Vikings here, is there anything that you want to get off your chest before we get into this? I don't want to just ramble and leave you out of the first 5 minutes of the show because I don't know how long I can go.
You can if you want. It's I'm annoyed we have to run a Vikings segment. I understand that we do. I don't really want to think about this team for another couple of months. Packers fans, I don't know how many of them are going to be watching this. I don't know if they want to think about their team for another couple of months. It's disappointing a little bit that after such an exciting season for both of those teams, because even though both teams, the Packers were up and down, the Vikings were mostly up, it was a pretty exciting season if you were a fan of either team, I think. To have it end like this is just hugely deflating entering into the offseason. But there's plenty to pay attention to. It's time to start looking into the future. The future's bright, I think, for both of those teams, but right now it just feels like it stings a little bit.
This wasn't your first heartbreak with the Vikings, though, right? It depends if you count 2022 with Kirk Cousins as a heartbreaking season.
No, I knew that team wasn't good. I was predicting them losing to the Giants. I wasn't heartbroken. I thought the Vikings were going to win. I really believed.
Yeah, that was the difference. We knew that team, their defense was just so bad in 2022 that this year felt like there was the chance to go on one of those runs. Okay, so now Ziggy, why don't you talk real quick? A quick fix of Ziggy's mic. Show us.
Sorry about that, folks. As people wonder whether I'm always using the bad webcam mic, the answer is only sometimes.
That's good. All of a sudden we're recording. I'm like, wait a second, that doesn't sound like the Ziggy's microphone. And here we are. Now we get crystal clear Robert Ziggy Ziegler for the rest of the show. Okay, so we're going to start with the Vikings here. Obviously, that game did not go as planned in many different ways. I tricked myself into believing again. I was talking about possibly, I wasn't going to do it, but my uncle called. He's like, you going to go to Philadelphia if they win? I'm like, got to win this game first. But like, no, I'm not going to Philly. I don't want to go there. But I started thinking in my mind, this Eagles team, how are they beatable? And then the first play was the 27-yard pass to Puka Nacua, and I went, okay, I'm ahead of myself here. The big focus, though, on this game is around Sam Darnold. That's what you're going to see in all the national media. You saw it on Tuesday morning. You're going to see it Wednesday. It's going to be the whole conversation around the Vikings. What to do with Sam Darnold? What happened to Sam Darnold? Now, Ziggy, I was just looking at his numbers because a lot of people were saying the Vikings were frauds, and I've pushed back on that. You've pushed back on that several times, saying, no, they were playing really good football. It just fell apart. And you try and find the reasons why. Maybe Aaron Glenn just devised the perfect game plan against them, and the Rams copied that. But if you look at Sam Darnold, after the Jaguars game on November 10th, he had 3 interceptions. The offense was horrible, but they won the game because of the defense. From then on, Ziggy, Sam Darnold went 7-0, leading up to the Detroit game. Sam Darnold went 7-0, 18 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. We talk about Jordan Love last season, going 6-2, 18 touchdowns, 1 interception over the final 8 games of the regular season, and how he was at a superstar level. Sam Darnold was playing that kind of football. He was playing MVP football. The same way we felt about Jordan Love is the way that Sam was playing. And he probably would have gotten that $50 million crazy deal if he continued playing like that, at least through maybe up to the divisional round. Like that was the problem is that it wasn't just bad. It was so bad that you have to rethink everything. Sam completely fell apart. I don't blame him for everything that happened. I think KOC got outcoached. I think that the offensive line fell apart on offense. The receivers weren't getting some separation at times. But that's part of being the quarterback. There's a reason Sam Darnold was the guy who was carried into the locker room. There's a reason that all of the reels are about Sam Darnold that we put out. QB kind of gets over-glorified, also gets a little too much of the blame. So when you have the kind of performance Sam had against Detroit, against LA, you deserve some criticism. It's a reason to kind of hesitate on his future with the Vikings. I kind of think he'll be back next year, and I'll let you talk about that because you mentioned as the worse Sam played, the better chance you thought he'd be back. But when you look at Sam Darnold as a whole here, you have to remember he had a great season. It was 2 really bad games. And I trust Kevin O'Connell to go back and look at the tape and figure out whether or not he's the right guy heading into next year, or if it's time to invest in JJ McCarthy or perhaps someone else we'll get to in a second. So what was your thoughts on that? Do you think Sam Darnold right now will be back next year?
The more I've thought about it, the more I've come to the conclusion I will be shocked if Sam Darnold plays for any other team than the Minnesota Vikings next year. And the reason for that is simple. There are not as many teams that need quarterbacks as people think. So like you look at the teams that actually need a quarterback this offseason. The ones that are obvious are the Browns, the Raiders, the Giants, and the Jets.
Titans.
The Titans could use a quarterback, but Will Levis has been up and down. The Colts could maybe use a quarterback. You can throw in some other teams in there, like maybe the Seahawks, maybe the Saints. But almost every team that needs a quarterback is going to be picking pretty high in the draft, high enough that they can be considering an alternative. And Sam Darnold, if you're a GM on a hot seat, if you're a guy starting over and trying to build a reputation of your owner, get yourself some credibility, I don't think what you saw from Sam Darnold in Minnesota this year was enough for you to think that he can be the guy who can save your job, that he can be the guy long term. So I think wherever Sam Darnold goes, it's probably going to be on a bridge type contract. Now, maybe it'll be more like Gardner Minshew. Maybe it'll be a little bit more like some of the other instances we've seen. But I don't think Sam Darnold's getting big time starter money after what he showed this year. Now, if you're Sam Darnold and you're going to be a bridge quarterback somewhere, why would you go to New York? Why would you go to Cleveland? Why would you go to Vegas? You've got a place where you know you can play great football. Clearly, he gets along well with guys in the building. Everybody loves him. If he's thinking long-term options, playing well for the Vikings next year is the best way to try and show that he's worthy of a bigger deal. And the Vikings need a bridge quarterback as much as any other team. JJ McCarthy is coming off substantial reconstructive knee surgery. They redid almost his entire knee. He didn't have tons of experience coming in. He played more than like an Anthony Richardson, but this wasn't like a Bo Nix 5-year college starter type situation. I think if you're the Vikings, you're crazy to let Sam Darnold go. He's clearly the best option for you as a bridge quarterback. And I think if you're Sam Darnold, you're crazy to leave. You're going to play better for Minnesota than you will anywhere else. And I don't think you're getting big time money or a better situation. So I think this match remains perfect. I don't see why Sam Darnold would leave. And I don't think any team's going to be desperate enough to try and fork over huge cash to bring Darnold into the building.
Well, what could that kind of a deal look like, do you think, if he were to return to Minnesota? Like, do you want him on a 3-year deal right now? Because again, we're talking about after these 2 games in particular, but after watching that and thinking, all right, maybe you want to get to JJ McCarthy sooner, do you want Sam on a 3-year deal?
I don't think that Sam Darnold is going to sign a long-term deal with the Vikings. I think there's a chance he plays on the franchise tag. I think there's a chance they negotiate a 1 or maybe 2-year deal. I don't think it makes sense for Sam Darnold to sign a long-term deal. If he puts together another good half season or full season with the Vikings, who knows? He might start every single game next year.
Yep.
But if he puts forth another season with the stats like he did now, even if he struggles in the playoffs, his market will get bigger. More evidence is always better. And there'll be more opportunities for him to show he can be the guy. And if you're the Vikings, I don't think you want to commit 3 years worth of money to Sam Darnold.
No, you don't.
So I think a 1 year or maybe 2 year deal is the most we're going to see. But I expect him to play on something relevantly similar to the franchise tag.
Okay, I can see a 1 or 2 year deal. Maybe you have it out after year one, or a team option, something like that. But what I'm thinking, I agree with you. He took himself out of the $50 million club with the way he played the last 2 games. Like, you're not going to get.
I don't think he was in it to begin with.
Probably not, but he had a chance to get into it, depending on his postseason.
Maybe someone gets desperate.
Sure, maybe someone got desperate, or if he had played great against the Lions and the Rams, then we're talking about a full season of MVP caliber football, and maybe he gets a shot. But you're right, since he's not in that club, and you have the teams you mentioned, the Raiders, the Browns, the Giants, as the main teams looking for a quarterback, you can make an argument for Colts, Titans, Seahawks, or Saints. It's 7 teams right there. I think Geno will be back in Seattle. Now it becomes, okay, Sam has the most interest, I'd imagine, in returning to the Vikings, because who would want to pick one of those 7 teams to...
You don't think he wants to go back to the Jets?
Oh yeah, I forgot. I'm sorry, I forgot to put the Jets in there as well.
Well, I cannot imagine a world where Sam Darnold returns to the Jets.
No. So Sam, for his career, the best decision is to return to Minnesota. I think, regardless of, unless someone offers him, goes crazy and goes $50 million, which will not happen. So, given what he's going to be offered, staying with the Vikings and that talent and Kevin O'Connell is the best thing for him to win and for future earnings. The question here now is, what do the Vikings see as the best option for them? And you think right now that that's bringing back Darnold for a year or two. I probably agree with you, but there are going to be some murmurings about other names. Daniel Jones is on the team right now. I can't really see that being an option. Okay, all right, relax. I don't think that's going to be...
No, why? Like, if you're adding a guy like Daniel Jones, you're just adding a much worse Sam Darnold.
Yes, I agree with you. So I think Daniel Jones will be the backup. I think there are 3 names that are in the ring to be the Vikings starting quarterback next season. 1 is Sam Darnold. 2 is JJ McCarthy. The 3rd is Aaron Rodgers. I know that people are going to think that's crazy. You're going to say he's 41 years old. He's coming off a terrible season. He can be a problem in the locker room. But he still showed some signs this year of having it. Actually, 3 of his last 5 games this year were some of the best games he had all season. He was with the Jets. They're a disaster organization. I'm not out here advocating for Rodgers right now. It's just piquing my interest in something I'm thinking through. But here's why I'm intrigued. Kevin O'Connell got the best out of Kirk Cousins. He got the best out of Sam Darnold. Is it possible that he can tap into one more year of MVP level Aaron Rodgers? You have Justin Jefferson, you have Jordan Addison, you have TJ Hawkinson, you have Christian Darrisaw coming back, Brian O'Neill. You're set on the edge, probably work a little bit on the interior O-line. They have $70 million of cap space, the Vikings. Can you build for the future while also taking one shot of, hey, if this guy plays to the level that we think he can get back to, there's a shot at a Super Bowl, a legitimate shot at a Super Bowl next season. And it all depends on whether or not Kevin O'Connell thinks that Rodgers has it in him anymore. And if he doesn't, you know what? If he doesn't think that, don't even sniff it. Like, there's no reason to play that game. But if Kevin O'Connell looks at the tape and says, I think I can get a little more out of him, it's intriguing to me to roll the dice on 1 year of Rodgers and see if you get that MVP quarterback. And then you go on to JJ McCarthy, because Rodgers will retire.
I think here's the problem. Here's why I think that's an absolutely boneheaded reason.
It probably
Aaron
is.
Rodgers has shown consistently in the past 5 or 6 years that he doesn't want to play a kind of Kevin O'Connell type offense. He doesn't want motion. He doesn't want a zone run scheme. He wants to do things his way. And we saw this in New York. They had the horrendous Nathaniel Hackett offensive scheme where Aaron Rodgers got to do whatever he wanted. The Jets were dead last in motion. They were running an offense from the 2010s. Robert Saleh goes to the owner, says, hey, I need a new offense. This isn't going to work. Woody Johnson goes down, asks Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers says, no, I want my buddy in the building. I want to do things my way. It's a disaster. Robert Saleh gets fired. And one of the reasons it's given is that the offense is disastrous. Over and over again, we have seen Aaron Rodgers. It was the same problem in Green Bay. He didn't want to run LaFleur's offense. He wanted to do things his way. It led to some bad seasons. The Packers moved on. And while you can't say they've been much more successful in the postseason without him, the offense has been better since he's left. Aaron Rodgers refuses to play winning football in 2024. He wants to run a style of offense that's demonstrably bad.
Ziggy.
And no. You don't want him in the building. He's just going to want to do things his way.
First off, if you bring in Aaron Rodgers, the very first thing that needs to be made clear is that Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah are running the team. Going to the Jets, they bowed their heads at literally everything he did. They brought in all his guys. They brought in Cobb. They brought in Lazard. They brought in Hackett. Got him Devontae. That's not happening in Minnesota. And for a couple reasons. One, I think from top to bottom, the Wilfs all the way down to the last player in the organization, they are better run than the Jets. The Jets they're a mess, and they're always a mess. And they were just kneeling to Rodgers the entire season. That cannot happen. And if that happens, then it's a disaster. Yes, but if you're Aaron Rodgers too, and you're taking a look around the league at where you want to play next season, if you do decide to play, you're going to have to make that sacrifice to go to Minnesota because he's not. Let's just run through those teams. Is Aaron Rodgers winning a Super Bowl on the Colts, the Titans, the Seahawks, the Saints, the Jets, the Giants, the Browns, or the Raiders? No. Him playing on one of those teams makes no sense at all. He's not going to compete. He doesn't need the money. Any reason Aaron Rodgers will stick around is to try and win one more Super Bowl. And the only place you have a shot at doing that is Minnesota. And that will mean steering off your path and all the things that you want and joining into the culture that O'Connell and Kwesi have built there. And if he does that, I think it has a chance to work. I really do. But it all comes down to it's two things. It's Kevin O'Connell looking at it, watching the film and saying he's still got it. And it's Aaron Rodgers saying, I'm willing to put aside what I want and play for this team, for the betterment of the team. There's a world where it comes together.
I think you are delusional if you think Aaron Rodgers is willing to do that.
I probably am, but I see a world where it can work. And I know Rodgers. I know you watch the documentaries and everything, and there's probably not. But the only way that he plays again next year is a serious football is with the Vikings, because no one else is going to take him. And Rodgers will come to he'll see that. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is a dumb guy. He'll see that.
We will see. I'd like any Packers fan who's watching this video to go in the comments right now and say what you think.
Oh well, they're going to light me up. Yeah.
No, well, do you think Aaron Rodgers is sane? Do you think he can play winning football? Do you think Aaron Rodgers, contrary to everything we've seen in the history of watching Aaron Rodgers, can set aside his ego, say someone else take the wheel, I'm just going to run the offense that I'm on the record saying I hate? Let us know. Let us know if you think that's what's going to happen.
All right, let's get into the Packers a little bit here. So we had the reaction following their 22-10 loss to the Eagles. Of course, I still think that game from the very, very first play got off to the worst start possible with the fumble. The Packers were kind of hosed on that call by the refs. Who knows where the game goes if that doesn't happen. I was upset watching that. Partially, I do not like the Eagles as well as the Packers, but we're going to take a look here. This was a disappointing year for the Packers. A couple fans have called it a failure. I wasn't willing to go that far. I don't think you were either, but certainly disappointing given the expectations that Green Bay had. Let's take a quick look.
You've been watching Andy Herman?
Me?
That was exactly what he said. He said it's not a failure, but it was a disappointment.
Well, maybe Andy was watching us. I said that like 10 minutes after the game ended. So maybe Andy was watching the Paul Farrington show. I did not see Herman's reaction yet. That's funny. But great minds think alike. So the needs for this team, Ziggy. Let's each give one big need, okay? Coming into next season. This is a Packers team that I think everyone still believes in, and you just said it in the last segment. This is still a team that can go on a Super Bowl run next year. I'd be shocked if they weren't one of the top 10 favorites on the odds. They probably, those odds I'm sure are out already. But Green Bay is still one of the big contenders. They just need to get back to that winning football they were playing at the end of last season so consistently. It was too jittered this year. There wasn't enough consistently good play for this to be a Super Bowl team, and they came into the season the postseason on a 2-game losing streak. Different feeling from last year when they were red hot, winning 6 out of the final 8. So, Ziggy, what do you think is the biggest need for the Green Bay Packers heading into 2025?
The Packers this year were a team that went as far as their defense, and the defense was often good, but it wasn't quite good enough. And I think the thing that's holding this Packers team back from being having a truly championship level defense, there's really only one position. The defensive line played well enough. The linebackers, Edgerrin Cooper looks like he is going to be a star.
Yeah,
the safeties are probably the best in the entire league. The big problem for this team on defense is at cornerback. Now, if you live in like magical Christmas land and everybody could be healthy all the time, maybe the cornerbacks would be good enough. But it's January. It's the middle of January. As the Packers saw in Philadelphia, Christmas time is over. And Jair Alexander has played 34 games in the past 4 seasons. You've got Corey Ballantyne, Eric Stokes, Robert Rochelle heading out of the building. Now, I'm not saying all those guys were elite, but that just furthers the need for this. The Packers need cornerbacks. It's not just depth. They need reliable starters, guys that aren't going to get hurt, guys that can play just about every game for them. And the Packers,
that feels like a
it's
shot.
not clear they have a single one of those guys. Maybe they have one, right? Carrington Valentine had looked pretty good at different points in the season, but the Packers on defense are in desperate need of cornerbacks. And it doesn't matter if you can get pass rush going. It doesn't matter if you've got the best run defense in the NFL. If your cornerbacks are getting beat on almost every play, you can't keep up with the Lions. You can't keep up with the Vikings. You can't keep up with the Eagles.
The pulse that I'm getting from Packers Nation right now is that they're kind of done with Jair. The dude just hasn't played football in a long time. When's the last time he was healthy for a full season? What was the stat you had, Ziggy? He's missed how many games? Or
he's played 34 games in the past 4 seasons. In the past 4 seasons, he's played more than 7 games once.
Yeah, and that's... Look, for as good as he is when he plays, you got to be on the field. Availability is the best ability. And without him, you're trying out Eric Stokes, who I think he was out, right, for the last game. They just didn't play him against the Bears.
Yeah, and he's another guy who's had a career ravaged by injuries.
Yes, ravaged by injuries. There's a bunch of guys who are walking out the door, like you said. Look at what they did with the safety room, right? Last season, or 2 seasons ago, the Packers safety room needed to be blown up, and it was. Now you're at the spot where you have Xavier McKinney, Evan Williams, like you said, possibly the best tandem in the league. Javon Bullard being a backup there is awesome. Like, they revamped it completely, and now they have one of the best rooms. They kind of need to do that with the cornerback room. And it's much easier said than done, right? Here we are as Vikings fans. We've been drafting first-round cornerbacks for a decade, and we haven't found real stability at that position. Cornerback is hard to find. It's hard to really lock in to a stud. That's why it's tough to move on. If you want to move on from Jair Alexander, go for it. But you know what? When you're getting scorched by Jared Goff in week 6 next season, you're going to be looking around at Jair somewhere else if he's playing. This is the thing. If he's playing and saying, wow, I wish we had that guy back on our roster.
I think I've seen some Packers fans comparing the Jair situation to David Bakhtiari. And I will say, I think this is a totally different situation. Bakhtiari was a weird case where a single injury cost him 3 seasons, just about. He played, 12 games across his last 3 seasons, 13 games, something like that. Jair has gotten unfortunate, right? He had that shoulder injury, he had the knee injury this year. The medical staff, it seems, rushed him back, and he re-injured it. There's a disaster all around. The defense plays a lot better with Jair on the field. I know some Packers fans have forgotten this, and I can understand why, given how little he's played, but there's a reason this guy got a top 5 cornerback contract in the NFL. My prediction is they're going to do with him what they did with Preston Smith, where they say, look, we'll have you back, but we're going to pay you a little bit less. We're going to give you some incentives so that if you're healthy and if you're playing, you'll make about as much as you would have. And then we can renegotiate after this year. I don't know if Jair will be amenable to that, if he'd rather get cut and go somewhere else. I don't think getting rid of him is the solution. But even if you have Jair Alexander for 17 games and he plays first team all-pro level like he can, he alone is not enough to fix this room.
No, but you know what? That's a pretty damn good start, right? If you're Jair Alexander, without him, this cornerback room, yeesh.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Without him, it can't be great next year. You can't get 3 great corners in an offseason.
Yes.
You can't even really get 3 good corners. The only path to them having a great cornerback room next season is hoping Jair gets healthy and adding 1 great player around him, and that's much more feasible.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking as well. So you're going to need to go about that route. And there's some additions that need to be added to the rest of this Packer defense. I think they're on the right track. Jeff Hafley came in, and everyone would agree that was an upgrade as to what they had last season. So you go ahead, get a few more pieces. Edrin Cooper's emergence, as you said, was huge. On the D-line, Lucas Van Ness didn't turn into what a lot of people were expecting this year. Rashawn Gary doesn't always play up to the level of the contract he was awarded. So you still need a couple more. You want the animals. You want someone to come in and just be a freak like Edgerrin Cooper was to end the season. And if you get one more of those guys, I think this Packer defense is trending in the right direction. They just need to fill a few holes here or there. I'm going to take things over to the offensive side of the ball. And it's kind of obvious where we're going. But the receiving room, obviously it's talented. Obviously, they have 4 guys that they trust a lot in Dontavian Wicks, Jayden Reed, Romeo Doubs, and Christian Watson. But again, injuries are kind of like, for Christian Watson especially, injuries, huge concern. Romeo Doubs missed time this year. I think Jayden Reed is the best of the group, but there's no alpha receiver. And this is what we talked about in the reaction show against the Eagles. At times when you're watching the Packers, you just want a little more from the receivers, especially when you have situations like this season where the 4 of them were rarely on the field together. You want that guy who can take over a game. Look at the impact that and this is unfair to say Justin Jefferson because he's amazing. He's the best in the league. But you see the impact that Justin Jefferson can have for guys like Jordan Addison, Jalen Naylor, TJ Hawkinson. If you just have an elite alpha number 1, which LaFleur said he wanted to vomit hearing it this offseason. People are asking who the one is. He's like, I'm tired of hearing this. When you have that guy, it opens everything else up. Like, let's pretend they go and get T. Higgins. That's a name that's been mentioned a lot. You have to pay more attention to T. Higgins. Opens things up for Josh Jacobs. That gives more time for Jordan Love to throw the football. It opens things up for Jayden Reed. I think they're missing that one dude to take attention away from these other playmakers from catapulting into that offensive sphere that we expected them to get into this year. So that's got to be a position that they look at. And I think T. Higgins is a name. I also think Devontae Adams is a name for someone they might go after. He was on Kay Adams' show. I don't know if you saw this, Ziggy. He said they asked him what the Packers need. He said the Packers obviously depends on the health of the team. It's looking right now like they might need some receiver help in one way or another. Maybe a veteran or something. We'll see. So maybe
I think he's talking about Tyreek Hill.
Tyreek Hill. I think any Packer fan would take Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, the thing is the Packers were going into this season, I think, hoping that one of their 4 receivers would have a breakout season. And I think maybe the least likely outcome happened. All of them were okay. None of them really sucked. None of them broke out. But the injuries were disastrous. Romeo Doubs now has a concussion history. It's been there. It's caused a lot of problems. Christian Watson, tearing your ACL in week 18, he won't be back to start the season, I don't think. There's a chance he misses a substantial part of next year. So even if they can't even bring back the same room they had this year. You're absolutely right that they need upgrades. They need it now. I don't think they have time to draft a guy, see and hope that he hits. There's always going to be a couple rookie receivers that have incredible seasons, but usually they were drafted just behind guys who were total busts. You never know which end of that you're going to end up on. So I think if you're the Packers, free agency and trades are probably the place to go. We saw the Eagles doing this with A.J. Brown. When there's an opportunity, now they can't get a guy quite like that, I don't think. I don't think there'll be someone as young, as exciting. But we saw when A.J. Brown was traded to the Eagles, the offense immediately exploded.
Yep.
If you can get those top guys in, they not only do they make the other wide receivers look well, but more importantly, I think for the Packers, they make the quarterback look great too. The quarterback gets easier throws. He gets a guy he can rely on. He gets a safety blanket. He gets a deep threat all in one. Like there's lots of guys around the league that can do that. The Packers should be considering. Jordan Love is not at the level, and there's very, very few quarterbacks that can do this. They can level up mediocre wide receivers, journeymen, and make a great offense out of it. Patrick Mahomes can do it. Josh Allen can do it. Lamar Jackson can ignore it because he can run. That's basically it for guys who have in the NFL that have shown that they can do that. There's no shame in Jordan Love that he's not there. But we have seen time and time again, adding that wide receiver one can unlock something. It happened to Joe Burrow. It happened to Jalen Hurts. It's happened around the league.
Happened to Tua with Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, even though the Dolphins haven't won anything, their offense got so much better. The defense started holding them back. Getting that wide receiver one can transform a young quarterback's career, and failing to get it can ruin it.
And you look at the teams too who are in the playoffs right now, right? You have the big three with Lamar, Mahomes, and Josh Allen. They are the kind of guys that can sort of exists without a wide receiver one because they're just that good. I don't think any Packer
Josh Allen needed Stephon Diggs to kickstart his run.
No, to kickstart it 100%. But, like right now, they're self-sustaining. They're just machines, those guys. You look, and I don't think any Packer fan would argue Jordan Love is on that level, at least right now. And then the other teams that are making the playoffs, right? You got the Vikings with Jefferson. You got the Rams with Puka and Cooper Kupp. Baker and Mike Evans, who's, I think, better than all the Packer receivers. Like, you could go up and down the board here. The Commanders had Terry McLaurin. Like, the Lions, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Go through all the playoff teams, right? Nico Collins, one of the best receivers in the league for Houston. All these teams that got in, really outside of the Packers, maybe the Steelers, depends what you think of George Pickens, had either an elite receiver or one of the three best quarterbacks in football. The Packers were the only team really that did not have that. And
and if you look at like the Chargers and the Steelers and the Packers, they had horrible games.
Yeah, exactly.
The Broncos, horrible game.
Exactly. Those teams that got in, horrible games without having that stud receiver there. They're all out. They're all out and played terrible football. So you sort of need that. And I think the Packers sit at the top of that group. If you were to say the Chargers, the Steelers, the Broncos, and Green Bay, most people would be most bullish on the Packers. It's not a bad spot to be in where Green Bay is. It's just if you could get that guy, you could go to the next level. And I wonder what Devontae Adams could look like if there's a little bit more gas in the tank. But T. Higgins is probably the guy that everyone's going to look at this year. And you mentioned it with I think A.J. Brown to Philly's the best example here, or that's probably the best one. What those guys can do. I think of Alshon Jeffrey going to Philly in 2017. One of my lesser known takes is that Alshon Jeffrey picking the Philadelphia Eagles over the Vikings in 2017, that offseason, I think that actually may have decided the Super Bowl. As crazy as that sounds, because those were the two teams who were playing at the end of the year. Jeffrey kicked our ass, was great the playoff run. He was awesome that year, and we just didn't have enough weapons at the end there against Philly. I mean, there's so many reasons that game fell apart, but receiver and cornerback would be the two biggest needs. And if Green Bay's able to address it, there's no reason that this team won't be back. People will say we're pandering by saying this, but come on, like you look at what's going on here. It's an 11-6 team. They're not that far off. Just get the right pieces in place and look out. Well, we should have a fun NFC North next year. Okay. Got a couple more topics here to close out the show. I want to talk a little bit about the Texans. I feel like we owe an apology almost to Texans fans, Ziggy, because we had a pretty good Texans fan base over the course of the 2023 season. Really nice of Houston fans to come in on the channel. We got a lot of interaction from them. And then we kind of ghosted them during the course of this season. Now, was that partially deserved with the way Houston was playing? Yeah, a little bit. But also, I think we kind of navigated more NFC North over the course of the year and failed to acknowledge, Houston did win the division. All right. They did win the division. And here they are now in the divisional round in a rematch of their game earlier in the year against the Chiefs. They went on the road, lost 27-19 to Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. And, that game, it's unfortunate. I believe that was the game Tank Dell got hurt. And Tank Dell was having a really good game too going into that. So I'm already a little concerned without Dell, without Diggs. This was not the version of the Houston offense that we expected to see in the playoffs. The reason they brought in Diggs was to match the Chiefs, the Bills, the Ravens, the explosive offenses. Exactly the way the Texans thought it would play out is what's happening right now in the AFC. Would you agree with that? The teams that they're trying to beat are all the teams that made it. And I look at this here as I don't know if they're going to be able to win a shootout. Like, I don't think it'll be a shootout. To me, my focus is Stroud not turning the football over and the defense it'll be turnovers, I think, and the defense getting enough stops and maybe that late crucial stops of Mahomes. But there's a chance here, right? You don't think the Texans go and get blown out, do you?
I found a lot of lines puzzling this weekend when they opened. Texans +8 was maybe the most puzzling line there is, at least for me. I was thinking when you mentioned Tank Dell, what an unfortunate injury. He fractured his fibula last year. This year he dislocated his kneecap. That's like the stuff that careers end on.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the Texans can match up very well against this Chiefs team. The Chiefs offensive line has struggled. And I know Patrick Mahomes is great at avoiding pressures and avoiding sacks. Will Anderson is great at causing sacks. Danielle Hunter is great at causing sacks. You do not want a vulnerable offensive line going against this team. The Texans' defensive backs, you've got Kamari Lassiter, Derek Stingley, and apparently now Jeff Okudah are all playing decent football. Lassiter and Stingley in particular have an argument for the best cornerback duo in the league. They got Justin Herbert to throw 4 interceptions. Now, I worry more about the Texans' offense. I worry about Chris Jones versus the Texans' interior offensive line. The interior O-line has been maybe the weakest unit on the Texans this year.
For a while.
Chris Jones is a monster. This is his 3rd year in a row as a first-team All-Pro. And honestly, he got a bunch of second-team All-Pros when Aaron Donald was playing, and that's not fair. That's basically a first-team All-Pro. It's not your fault you have to go against the best defensive player to ever live. So I'm worried about the offense, but with a great defense. We have seen this Chiefs team and the offense struggle in so many games against inferior defenses and inferior competition. I know we're saying the team's starting to get healthy. Like maybe Jalen Watson's back, Marquise Brown, Isaiah Pacheco, those guys are back and they can play. I don't think the Chiefs offense is going to have a great game. And I think Houston's defense is going to keep them in it. Over a touchdown seems outrageous.
I think a lot of people are still thinking about that Christmas Day game, 31-2, when they lost to the Ravens. Like that's a kind of performance on national television that's hard to overcome for a lot of people when you think about the Texans. Like they've won what? They've won 3 of their last 5, 4 of their last 6 heading into the playoffs, and those losses were to the Chiefs and the Ravens, 2 of the best teams in the league. But if you go back and watch that Chiefs game, it was a very good game throughout. I mean, the Texans had their chances at the end of the game to tie or take the lead. They were a step away from being in a position to win. So you go back and watch that, and you see CJ Stroud was pretty comfortable in Arrowhead. He had 2 bad interceptions in the first half, but they ultimately weren't too costly. I think that if Stroud plays clean, and I don't expect the moment to be too big for him. CJ Stroud is one of those guys to me that he's ready for the moment. I'd be really surprised.
He's won 2 playoff games now. He knows what it takes.
I'd be really surprised if he came out and had a dud. The worry that I have for CJ is it's not in him. It's about that Chiefs defense is really good. Like if they're pressuring him the whole game, like you said, Stroud was sacked 52 times this year. That's second most in the league. You know who's number 1?
Who is number 1? Is it Sam Darnold?
Sam is 4th with 48. Geno Smith was 3rd at 50. Number 1, 68 sacks, 16 more than anyone else, Caleb Williams. So
he took 68 sacks. Is that a record?
It might be. Check it. That might be a record. But CJ Stroud has been sacked a lot this year. And my concern is that if this turns into one of those games where it's a defensive battle and the Chiefs again stops, that's the game where Mahomes does just enough to extend it to a 10-point lead late. And it's never really a game. It's never a blowout. And the Chiefs advance to the conference championship. It's going to come down to the Texans offense finding ways to get touchdowns on the board. They were unable to do that in the first meeting they had. A lot of field goals. So I hope, and not a lot of field goals, I'm sorry. They had what, 2 field goals because they missed an extra point. So they had 2 touchdowns, 2 field goals in that game. But still, without Tank Dell playing in this, I'm a little concerned for the offense. But I do think that given the defensive performance they've had to this entire season, particularly last week, and given that I believe in CJ Stroud, I think the Texans can go in there and win this. I'm not going to pick them, but I would not be surprised if at the end of the game, CJ Stroud has the ball late and is going on a game-winning drive.
I feel embarrassed. Texans fans will know who the record holder for most sacks in a single season is.
Or was it David Carr?
It was David Carr in his rookie year. He took 76.
So Caleb was close on that. Jeez.
Yeah, it's Randall Cunningham was number 2, Philly 1986, 72 sacks. Can you imagine? I don't understand how you go back and play another year after you take 76 sacks. David Carr shows up again at 4th. 3 years later, he took 68 sacks. So I don't understand why you continue playing football at that point. But to go back to this game, I think the Chiefs offense they had an above average performance for them on the season against the Texans, as you said, when the Texans went to Arrowhead.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen again. I can't see Patrick Mahomes escaping this game with a relatively efficient performance, a touchdown, and no interceptions. I think this Texans defense is hungry.
They are.
And it's a lot to ask for your defense when you're going against Patrick Mahomes to win you the game. I'm But from what we've seen from CJ Stroud and Joe Mixon, they've gotten better as the year has gone on. Nico Collins showed last week when the time comes, they can step up. And the Chargers defense, everybody's acting like they're a bunch of bums because the Texans put up 32 on them. This Chargers defense was one of the best in the NFL. And Joe Mixon turned in one of his best performances of the season. And CJ Stroud showed that he's back. Nico Collins, actually, even more than CJ Stroud showed that he's back.
I would say that first half, the Texans offense, up until that incredible scramble play from Stroud, was pretty uneventful.
Yeah,
but after that, they woke
that's
up.
What you want. Well, you want an offense that can turn it on off just one
So
play.
here's the thing, though. Here's where this is where I'm really excited to watch the Texans. Is that if you look back over the last 5 games that they played with Stroud starting, because they beat the Titans at the end of the year with all the backups in. The final 5 games, they lost to the Titans, beat the Jags by 3, beat the Dolphins by 8, lost to the Chiefs, blown out by the Ravens. Like, we really haven't seen good Houston Texans football. This is why so many people pick the Chargers to beat them. We haven't seen good Houston Texans football for most of this season, especially down the stretch here. That Charger game was the first time where you watched them and went, oh, wow, like that's what they were supposed to look like. Maybe not 4 interceptions on an elite quarterback, but that's the team that we were expecting, a Super Bowl caliber team. And this is why it's kind of exciting, because you got that performance in the playoff game. Like, you could, and this is in the playoffs. Forget about the rest of the regular season. Like, it's one and done. If you show up, if you get hot at the right time, you can go win a Super Bowl. So I don't think they're going to go into Arrowhead and win this. It's a tough place to play. Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league and thrives in these moments. But there's a lot of reason for optimism, because the team that you've been waiting to see showed up, especially in the second half against the Chargers. And if you get a performance even close to that, if you get that effort level and Nico Collins is unstoppable, they can win this game. So it's unlikely, but the Texans are here.
I'll tell you what you can't do. You can't have a fumble on the first snap of the game.
No.
If they do that against the Chiefs, it's over.
No, you can't have that. So the Texans, there you go, guys. Like, wait, I don't necessarily believe in you, but I do. I am looking forward to watching you play. And I wasn't thinking that last week. Chargers Texans, I was not looking forward to watching. And here we are now in the divisional round. So, all right, the last thing I want to talk about, I don't even have notes on this, Ziggy. So we're just going to kind of go off here. I had at least some talking points. We do it live. Screw it. We do it live. A lot of Lions fans have been listening to the show lately, so I feel like we have to hit that. They were in the live.
They're the best team in football right now.
They are. No, they
David
are.
Montgomery's back.
David Montgomery's back.
Which might be a bad thing.
Is he back?
Terry and Arnold's fully ready.
This is scary.
Like, this team's starting to get healthy.
No, this is scary for the rest of the league. I felt all year long that the Lions have been a team of destiny. Even when the Vikings were 14-2 going into Detroit, I picked the Vikings to win the game, but in my gut, I still had that this is the Lions season kind of a feeling to it. And if you gave the Lions everyone all season long, this team might be undefeated. I'm sorry, they lost to the Bucs, but this Lions team has been damn near difficult to beat.
It'd be 16-1.
They've been really difficult to beat with all these injuries. This is a talented defense. I mean, this was a defense that was going to be one of the best in football if they were fully healthy. Getting some guys back right now, okay? I think Anzalone makes just a huge difference. You saw him in the Viking game, how important he is. He's a freak running around the field, like out of his mind. And when you're not playing him, he's a lot of fun to watch. But when you're playing him, it sucks. I have a hard time seeing them losing to the Commanders. The Commanders are, this young upstart team with Jay and Daniels for first year coaching there for Dan Quinn. Like they're a great story, and they're trickier than people think. Like, I think this will be a game, but it would just what a horrible way to end the year if they lost to the Commanders here. It seems like Lions Eagles has been the destiny meeting all season long in the NFC. Don't be surprised if the Rams upset Philly and you get Stafford versus the Lions again. Like, no matter what, you're going to get a great NFC Championship game. But as these guys get healthier, the Packers are out, the Vikings are out. I think the path is right there for Detroit to go on this. So let me ask you this. Would you take Detroit or the field in the NFC to get to the Super Bowl right now? It's got to be Detroit, right?
If there's one rule we know about the NFL playoffs, it's that you don't do it your first time. So, like, the Commanders aren't going on a run this year, but that's been true for a long time. The Eagles didn't do it their first time. The Patrick Mahomes wasn't able to do it the first time. The Bengals haven't done it the second time, but they weren't either. Yeah, but like in the NFL, it is very hard your first season going into the playoffs as a franchise, like in whatever era you're in, to go and win the Super Bowl. You learn a lot of hard lessons losing. And last year, I know Jared Goff had learned a lot of those with the Rams, but a lot of the players on the Lions hadn't. Dan Campbell hadn't. It was their first time as a franchise and as with any of the players, really, of the organization, with the exception of Goff, being in that kind of situation. And they suffered a heartbreaking loss. As you said, since that loss, this has looked like the team of destiny. And it's hard for me not to pick the Lions here. I think they're clearly the best team left in the NFC. The Eagles, I know they beat the Packers, and they beat the Packers pretty convincingly, but their passing offense was horrible. The Eagles did not play a great game of football. The Packers played a bad game of football. You look at the Rams. I think the Rams are a nice team. There's a lot of upside there. Matthew Stafford is good. The Lions would be 7.5-point favorites hosting the Rams. I don't think there'd be much competition there. The Commanders, as you say, great young team,
Ooh.
but
I don't know, man.
Right, the hypothetical line right now at Vegas is 6.5. It would move up to 7.5. I guarantee.
The Rams. I think the Rams are a scary team.
The Lions are a scary team.
Oh, they're scary.
And here's the thing, right? You said if they were healthy, they would have gone through the year maybe they were 15-2 already. They probably would have gone 16-1. The thing about the Lions is they're starting to get healthy. Terrion Arnold is a guy you don't hear a lot about because he's a rookie. He had a tough start to the year. He had 1 million pass interference penalties. Well, against the Texans, a ref pulled him aside and said, here's why we're throwing these flags. Since then, he's been lights out, and he's finally coming back from injury. There's a chance a guy like Rakestraw might come back. If you're worried Jahmyr Gibbs was going to get tired, David Montgomery's back and practicing at home.
You know what's funny,
this team
Ziggy?
has overcome the odds. The odds now somehow are shifting back in their favor. So I'm not picking against the Lions for the rest of the season. I don't care who they're playing in the NFC. I don't care who they're playing in the AFC. I think it's the Lions year.
One thing that we're almost guaranteed this right now is that the Super Bowl is going to be a lot of fun, no matter who it is. Assuming it's the Lions or the Eagles in the NFC, everyone in the AFC who you want to watch is through.
And if it's not the Lions or the Eagles in the NFC, it means the Commanders or the Rams have gone on a historic, unbelievable run.
Yes. And yeah, I completely agree with you there. Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph and Lions fans are probably talking a little smack about you, Ziggy, after you said Evan Williams and Xavier McKinney are the best safety duo in the league. I was just thinking that as you were naming off the Lions defenders, I was like, wait a second.
These guys aren't the best, but they're in the top two.
So I'm with you. I think that the Lions right now, here's where the curse starts to come into play the next 2 weeks. Everyone's saying the Lions have broken their curse. That's over. These are the games now. The team that they've had this season beat the Commanders. Beat the Eagles. I like the Eagles. They're a good team. I don't like the Eagles, but they're a good team. This Lions team is better. This Lions team is clearly the best team in the NFC right now. I think that the only way they lose is to one of those AFC teams in the Super Bowl, one of the star quarterbacks. That's really the only path I see them losing at the moment. But this is where it's different for Lions fans. This is their first time really having like I talked about the Vikings and heartbreak. We talked about the Bills and heartbreak. The Lions had that last year, but they've never experienced that. No Lions fan has experienced that level of heartbreak that they had last year. This is where you're going to understand where we're coming from as Vikings and Bills fans if you lose. Because this was the year that you dominated the whole year. Last year they were very good, but they were the 3 seed. They went on a run. They were the 3 seed, right? Yeah, because Cowboys were the 2.
Yeah.
This is the year where the expectation now is that you win. 1998 for the Vikings, 09 for the Vikings. And then you just fall apart in the playoff game. So I don't think the Lions are like that, though, this team. Every indication is that they'll be ready for the moment. I think Dan Campbell is as good a coach as any that you can have for this situation to keep them hungry. They've been hungry all year. Because partially, I think the Vikings chasing them helped a lot. Because you could get a little complacent if you're 14-1 and 13-1 and you have no one chasing you. The Vikings were on their heels. I think that helps Detroit because they've had an edge all year. They've needed to keep winning games. And I think they're ready. I mean, I'm not rooting specifically for them, but I'll be very happy for all the Lions fans if they do go on a run.
This is the thing, Paul. I've been talking about how I think the curse has been lifted. I'll give you the best reason why. The Lions aren't cursed. They give curses. Look at every team that's played the Lions this year. Right? Teams after playing the Lions are 6-11, and a bunch of them went on buys. And as a Minnesota Vikings fan, we can both say we know exactly what it's like to be cursed after playing the Lions. Maybe it's playing the Rams after you play the Lions. Maybe that's the curse. I don't know. But this Lions team is so physical. You can see it the next week. Teams are exhausted after having played them. Basically, when you play the Lions, you're going to have a bad time. They're physical on offense. They're physical on defense. We've seen this cause a problem for both the Vikings, obviously, but just about any team they've played. The NFL is not like that much anymore. And the fact the Lions are and that they're good at it, I'm not picking against them the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think the kind of performance they had against the Vikings too is the kind of game that can just rejuvenate an entire defense that had been struggling of late. Now, look, maybe after watching the Rams Vikings, that was more of a Viking problem than than something to cheer the Lions on for. But
it's been a problem for everyone else that's played them, though.
Yeah. Nonetheless, though, and you know what? Look, Aaron Glenn. A lot of people are saying the Rams just took what Aaron Glenn did and replicated that. So the Lions, you got an elite offense, a recovering defense that looked great against the Vikings. I mean, they were the ones who halted the Vikings. At the beginning of the show, we listed off all the accolades for Darnold this season: 18 touchdowns and 2 interceptions over the final 7 games, 7-0. It was the Lions. It was that defense that went and stopped all of that, gave the Rams the blueprint, and knocked out Minnesota. Like that. That was Aaron Glenn. You got a great offense, recovering defense, and you have probably the best coaching staff in the NFL right now. I mean, this is it right here. We talk about windows and teams having the opportunity to win Super Bowls a lot. It does not happen often. You don't have seasons like this often. The NFC North schedule is much more difficult next year. The Lions will probably be good. I think we all agree that they're built for future success, but you never know what's going to happen. Jared Goff goes down, changes everything. Like this is the time right now. The history of the Detroit Lions. This is the Super Bowl year. And I get why fans might be a little nervous about that, but like this is what you become a fan for. Our seasons like this. If you're not enjoying this, if you're a Lions fan, if you're getting too worried, like just sit back on Sunday or on Saturday night. Enjoy it. Like I remember watching Notre Dame Penn State this past weekend, Ziggy. I'm in the stadium watching the game and I'm getting nervous. I all of a sudden thought to myself, like, it does not get better as a fan than this right here. A great game. You're with all your friends watching the game, talking with you during the game. Enjoy it. Like this is a special season, a special team. The only reason I wouldn't root for you guys is because that would just be another team to get the job done before the Vikings.
Because they're in our division.
And in the division. I'll be happy for you though if you win. I mean, this is a great story. Unbelievable turnaround, and for several reasons. Jared Goff, the organization as a whole, Dan Campbell as a head coach, like great year. All right, we'll wrap it up here. Fun, 45 minutes to an hour, somewhere in between there for us.
It was a nice little show. It was a nice little reaction.
Yeah, nice little reaction show. We'll jack back tomorrow as we dive into the divisional round preview. I cannot believe that we won 14 games this year and the divisional preview does not include the Vikings. That is crushing. That really, really hurts.
In the Minnesota,
the Rams were the worst possible matchup in that round for us. And the second, I don't want to get into it. So divisional preview coming up. We'll have reaction content this upcoming week, and it rolls on.